Hello, and welcome to
Pell on Earth.
My name is Cassidy,
My name is Casey.
and together we are the Bell Sisters. Join us each week as we corrupt your soul,
And bring you to salvation.
discussing life, death, and everything in between.
Are you afraid of getting into heaven?
Hey bitches, welcome back to the pod. So today we wanted to release a previously unreleased episode that we recorded back in 2022. So some of the references and news that we talk about is a little bit dated, but it's still super funny and super fun, so enjoy. We wanted to do a segment of just sharing our thoughts and opinions called
Thoughts and opinions. Because
'Cause we
we're
are
thoughts
and we have opinions.
Oh my god, slay.
That was even planned. I love that. So Casey, what
That's
are your
me.
opinions of the day?
Yeah. Oh, I have opinions. Well, I guess like the one that I've been thinking about recently is the whole like Nikita Dragun situation. Just because, like it's caused a lot of ruckus within plenty of communities lately.
It's caused
The gays and the straights. Everyone is up in arms.
it's caused ruckus, right?
This ruckus.
Everyone is up in arms over all of this, and I think it's really fucking dumb.
It is. All of it.
Yeah. Like, okay, let's discuss because I don't know if everyone knows what is going on with this whole thing. First of all, Nikita Dragun is like a beauty influencer on YouTube and the internet in general. She is a transgender woman. She came out like really early on in her life. So she's been transgender for like a really long time. And like,
Yeah, this is not something new.
yeah, and on top of having like she's just had like multiple surgeries and she's very open about all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um
Like, if you, for whatever reason, don't know who Nikita Dragun is, first of all, I'd like to make it clear that, like, I hardly know who she is, besides, like, knowing who she is. Like, I've never really followed her. Like, I don't really care. I know she's, like, very controversial in certain ways, but, like,
yeah.
the main point here is, like, the situation with her going to prison, which we'll get into in just a second. But, like,
Yeah.
if you don't know what she looks like, that's an important part of all of this drama. I advise that you, like, look up pictures of her first. Because really, like, the biggest part is that she is very, very femme. Like, very clearly, like, big titties, big ass, like,
Like shaved thighs.
yeah, like, you don't even, like, see the cooch, but you know that it's waxed. Like, that femme. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. So I had first heard about Nikita Dragun through Brentman Rock because I like Brentman Rock. I
Mhm.
don't really like any beauty influencers because I'm not 12.
Yeah.
But
And I'm not beautiful.
don't hate me because I'm beautiful.
I need to be influenced.
Yeah, I don't need to be influenced. I am the influence. But I do like Bretman Rock because I think he's funny. And he can be like really annoying sometimes, but sometimes he can be really funny, so I like him.
But like us, so
Yeah, exactly. And he lives in Hawaii and he has chickens. So
that's like
I know. It really is. Like I love his chicken content. It's very amazing. And so I heard about her through him because I guess they were friends for a hot minute, but everyone hates Nikita Dragun because sometimes she's like, I guess appropriates Black culture or something like that. I don't really remember her whole thing.
right.
But she does something that people don't like.
Yeah.
But so that's where Nikita Dragun is from like this toxic beauty community. And she's been on the internet for a while now. But basically what happened was whatever, like over the weekend, I guess she had like a mental breakdown or something.
Either a mental breakdown or some like drug induced episode. I think it was more that, although, like, again, we don't know her personally, so
Right, and I don't know if it's, like, anything's been necessarily confirmed or anything like that,
right.
like, publicly, but I do know that she was, like, diagnosed with, like, bipolar at some point,
Mhm.
which, like, obviously, if you have, like, manic episodes, like, that can cause you to not think clearly and do kind of, like, more
For sure.
outlandish type of things. But whatever, I don't really know, like, the whole thing into that. That's just what I saw on Twitter,
Right.
which is a whole other thing.
Mhm.
But basically what happened was she was arrested for being naked in public and then put into a men's prison. And that's where, like, the controversy began
Yeah.
because people were like, why the fuck are you putting her in a men's prison when she's, like, very clearly not a man?
Right.
Which is I don't really care about all of this. Like, honestly, she can be arrested all she wants.
Right. And that's why we're like, honestly, like, this is really just to like understand the situation. Like, we have no real opinion on Nikita or like her being arrested. Like, honestly, like, I don't fucking care. Like, that's not my
Yeah.
problem.
And, like, yeah, you can go into a whole discussion about, like, mental health and, like, people who
Right.
with the mental health issues shouldn't
Like, I'm
necessarily
not
be arrested.
excusing any of it or like
Right.
shunning any of it.
But also too, like, I don't know, like, the full situation. I don't know why she was arrested
I
and, like,
wasn't there.
yeah, so, like, whatever. Not really my issue. But obviously there is, like, a whole issue with, like, putting a woman in a man's prison
Right.
because that's, like, ridiculous.
And like, I think the bigger part of this is once again, like I mentioned, like Nikita's very feminine.
Mhm.
Like, like if you were walking down the street, like like obviously, especially some people who are early in their transition, like you can see certain aspects that are more masculine and yada yada. But like Nikita's very feminine.
Mhm.
Post surgery, like regardless of like genitals, like that's none of anyone's business. Like very, very feminine,
Mhm.
like very passing.
Mhm.
So like,
And what also wouldn't make sense to me is that she most likely has everything changed legally, right? Like,
right,
I
like
mean,
document
yeah,
wise.
document wise, I mean, like, she probably changed everything to female. So why she would be put in a men's prison doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And from what I saw on the internet, right, was that someone had said that, like, one of, like, the cops, I guess, that arrested her, like, someone said that she identified that herself as male to the arresting officers, which doesn't make any sense. Which I guess
Unless she was, still in crisis mode or whatever it was, like something could have happened. Who
if
knows?
something in her brain did, like, break or something like that, and she just, like, happened to say, like, "Oh, I'm, like, a he," or something, whatever.
Right.
I don't know. We have no idea what the situation was, but I feel like it still doesn't make any sense because if I went up to a police officer, right, and I said, "I'm a man," I don't know that they would put me in a men's prison.
Right.
Right? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter what she said or didn't say. Like, I would assume, I mean, like I said, I'm assuming, but I
Which
would assume that all of her legal documentation says that she's female. So why put her in a men's prison?
I do also remember seeing some clip because again, like I didn't like research necessarily the situation. Like we're just sharing opinions on the things that we've seen and
Right.
heard. So to like don't take this as like the fucking police report.
Yeah, for real.
Um
Do your own research or
right.
don't.
But yeah, or just like have shitty opinions like us.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I do like remember seeing some clip of her talking to either the judge or whatever it was, and her being like, "Do I have to be in the men's prison?" And like they said, "Yes, you do." So like even if during like whatever episode she was having, like she did state that she was male or whatever, like once she was in more of a sane state of mind, like I remember seeing that she did ask basically to go to the female side of the prison and they like rejected that.
I would also assume too that because Nikita does have a lot of influence and does have quite a bit of money, she would have a good legal team.
Right.
And so the fact that, like, whether or not whatever she stated, right, doesn't really matter because either way, at some point her legal team very early on, I would assume, would get involved
Right.
and would have been like, hey, she's a woman, like why is she in the men's prison?
Right. And if not like her specific legal team, like obviously her friends would fucking step in and be like,
Well,
they all
yeah.
have the money and influence to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they would notify like all her friends, like, hey, besties, your friend
Well,
just got arrested.
Well, I think there were people there with her.
Oh, were there people with her?
I think.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought she was just like on the street.
No, I think it was at like some hotel or something like that.
Oh. Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, why was she arrested then? Why didn't they just bring her back inside?
Well, some like public indecency, and I think she like spat water on a cop or something like that. She was like
Um,
causing a scene, quote unquote.
okay. All right. I
Yeah.
guess fair enough.
Yeah, like again, I'm not arguing like why she was arrested because again, I wasn't there. I don't know the situation, like whatever. And she was put on like like some kind of like whatever bail. Like I'm pretty sure she only stayed like a night or whatever it was. She wasn't there long.
Right. Yeah, she
But that's
wasn't in
besides the
there
point.
for like a long period of time. But it is kind of just like bizarre to me that she would be put into a men's prison.
Right. And it's also the fact that like her with that influence and that like feminine presentation is put in a man's prison, then like what about all the people who don't have the same whatever as her?
Right.
You
Like
know
the
what I mean?
same influence and stuff.
Yeah.
But my other question is she presents as feminine, right? She like not even just as like being transgender. Like she literally is just a feminine person.
Right.
She wears obviously she wears makeup and she has like the dresses and stuff. She has like a feminine presentation. She has her name changed. She most likely has her sex changed on all of her documentation. What police officer knows who Nikita Dragun is? And then would be like, "Oh, she's transgender."
A hater one.
Right? But that's what doesn't make
ACAB.
sense to me.
All police are haters.
Kissy, that's a
What?
ACAB ends in B.
Yeah, and police is also not a C, so your point?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I can't argue with you there.
Uh-huh.
Anyway.
Mhm.
But that's what I don't understand is, like, how did they know? Like, who
Which
how did they know?
like my only thinking is either she doesn't have it changed on legal documents or they like well, I mean she was naked, you know. So I don't
Mhm.
know if she has like a sex change, like if she did anything like surgically.
Right.
So like that would be my other thing is that like they're like, there's a penis. You're going with the man's.
The man's, right?
The plural man.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I feel like this is all just like now I'm feeling conspiracy
Yeah,
theory-ish
uh-huh.
because like I just don't understand why they would have put her in a men's prison. And like
It's also LA too.
yeah, but like you said like even if she didn't have it well also I just why wouldn't she be put in a holding cell first?
Right. Although I think she was, if I like saw correctly, I think she was put into like her own cell at like whatever point, like because of all like the controversy and drama. I think she was moved from like having like any roommates or anything like
Mhm.
that, or cellmates, I guess, not roommates. But
Oh, so now they're denying that they put her in a men's prison. I'm literally like Googling it as we're talking about it.
oh my god, are we gonna get canceled?
I hope so. Yeah, they're literally like
Of course, they would deny it.
the arrest affidavit states that Dragon appears as female but would like to be recognized as a male. However, in bond court, when the judge asked how Dragon would like to be addressed, she answered that her pronouns are she, her. And then it says the quote that you mentioned. And then it says,
Which one of like asking?
oh, she wasn't in LA, she was in Miami.
Oh,
We
whatever.
did not do any research for this.
No, actually, like I did see it was in Miami. I just forgot about that part.
Miami-Dade Corrections and Rehabilitation Department officials said in a statement the Dragon was never placed in a men's unit. I don't know why I said it like
unit. But what source is this, first of all?
it just says paper.
Oh, okay.
Written by Justine
Believable.
Fisher.
Believable.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I just feel like it's also weird to me. But then also, who like broke the story that she was in a men's prison? But that doesn't make any sense because why would she ask the judge?
But that's my thing. Exactly.
So
Like, why would that question be?
Why she wouldn't obviously ask the judge for like a conspiracy, like just to like get fame on the internet, and the judge also wouldn't answer like, no, you have to be in there.
See, because here from the Daily Mail,
Okay.
Dragun was then sent to the men's unit at the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center before being released without bail on Wednesday. Representatives for the influencer said her imprisonment in the men's unit was, quote, extremely disturbing and dangerous. And then it says, the jail says the star, quote, never made it beyond the bookings process at the unit while voicing its commitment to, quote, protecting the rights of the transgender community. And then it says Dragun was placed in a holding cell by herself due to her high profile status before being released, and she was escorted by an LGBTQ officer.
They really need for a slay officer.
They put her with an office her.
Oh my god. That's amazing. But
so really, like, what the fuck happened? Now that we're mad.
Well, you know what though? What happened with this case, because I did see this on Instagram and stuff, people are now like kind of coming forward because of like what happened with her and saying like, yeah, like I've been in like I saw a video of women, like trans women in men's prison talking about like their experiences and stuff and how unsafe they feel and how unfair it is that they're put into these circumstances because even though like Nikita's high profile, like, she got out quickly and whether
Right.
or not she was put into a men's prison or a women's prison, she would have gotten out quickly. No, like either way. And so it doesn't really even matter. But for a lot of other trans women and trans men put in prison, like they're not adequately put into the places going to keep them the safest, right? And there is like a fair amount of argument around this because it's like, well, how can you necessarily it is kind of like a hard thing to like talk about when it comes to prison, right? Because it's like it's not like a bathroom. Like, the bathroom issue is stupid because you walk into a bathroom and then you leave. Whereas, like, prison, like, you're being housed there. You know what I mean? With other, like, criminals.
Right, because that's the thing is that, like, regardless of honestly, like, whatever happened with Nikita, I think it just brings up the whole topic itself and
Mhm.
also, like, the public's reaction to it.
Mhm.
Because there were multiple people, even, like, when I had, like, posted, like, just the, I don't know, just, like, an Instagram post of, like, the headline on, like, my Instagram. I had people for sure in support, but there's also a couple that are like, well, she has a penis, biologically speaking. And it's like, I think this also just brings on the whole discussion of how transgender people are like viewed and treated.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to legal stuff. Cause like, yeah, like when it comes to like medical concerns, like being a biological this or that like can make a difference. However, when it
Mhm.
comes to something like this, like like what like benefit is there besides like the negative consequences?
Right.
Like is there to like putting Nikita or really like any transgender woman in a men's unit? Like it's just going to put them in danger.
Mhm.
It's obviously gonna traumatize them, and especially like transgender women. Sorry, Marty just grunted because Marty also supports the trans community.
Yeah, for real.
But like trans women are also severely fetishized.
Mhm.
So like of course people who are in jail and have criminal histories are not gonna fucking care about being polite.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like So you're just putting them in dangerous situations overall. And again, I think there are, I guess, in certain like circumstances, like nuances even to this, because there are people in like different parts of their transition, like whatever you present as this or that. But like, especially when it comes to someone who's like very feminine and like passes completely as a woman,
Mhm.
like there's a big difference.
Right.
Like if you can pass as a man, like again, even if you are trans, like you're gonna be safer passing as a man in a men's unit than passing as a woman in a man's unit. Like that
Right.
just is what it is, regardless of how you like identify personally.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, like, overall, like, obviously, prison isn't necessarily like, the safest place in the
Oh yeah.
world, right? So I do think there is, like, a lot more nuance to this conversation, though, because it's like, well, what do you do if someone transitions while in prison? Like, how do you provide them with
Right.
do you provide them with, like, medical assistance?
Right.
Where does, like, the money come from to provide them with that? If they have the ability to pay for it, does that allow them to then identify with the gender that most aligns with their identity? Like, it's such a weird issue that, like, now
Yeah.
comes out of this controversy,
Right.
whether obviously Nikita didn't bring that forward herself, right?
Right.
But there is a lot of, like, discussion to be had around an issue like this because I do think that in general, transgender people are, of course, always kind of like bottom barrel, treated horribly. People like have no idea what people like that go through and then
Yeah.
believe it to be a choice. And it's like, bro, like, why would I choose to be consistently harassed and
And
abused?
ostracized by the society.
Yeah, unless it was something that really mattered.
Right.
Like, why would you do that?
Right.
And I think
Exactly.
also too, like, partially because of the internet, I think that and I saw a statistic about this, I don't know how accurate it was or whatever, but I do think that people think that there are more people who identify as transgender than there are. I saw something like 1% of the United States identifies as transgender, and the study that I saw, like, it was something like 20 like, people thought that there were, like, 26 to, like, 30% of the population was transgender.
The fuck are you talking about?
Right, and so I think that is part of the issue because this is, like, a topic that everyone wants to talk about and no one understands.
Yeah, and I think, like,
Um
it's possible that that number came from something like there's been an increase in people who do identify, but, like, at the same time, there's been an increase of access to healthcare and acceptance in certain groups, you know what I mean? So, like, yeah, it's the same as, like, when it became more socially acceptable to be gay. Like,
Mhm.
there's gonna be an increase or a perceived increase in people who were gay because there were a lot who were fucking closeted.
Right.
And there still are. And
Mhm.
you're going to see it still increase.
Mhm. As acceptance continues to increase.
Exactly.
Yeah, for real. And of course, I do think until we get to a certain point, there will always kind of be some people who stay closeted, and that's obviously their
For
choice.
sure.
And I remember I had this conversation with someone and it was very irritating. But basically, like the whole thing with people who are transgender, people who are alternative in any regard,
Right.
like these people have always existed, like forever. It's just that there's now new language being brought about around this topic, and that's where like this. Like you said, perceived increase is coming from. It's
Right.
not like someone wakes up one day and is like, I'm trans. Like, no, it's like they've been trans, there have been transgender people throughout history and time,
And
and we've
culture.
and culture, yeah, we've seen this across documentation, like and the other thing is that the history just doesn't wanna, like, acknowledge it.
Right. Because of course we're not
Um,
going to be taught queer history in any regard in schools, you know? So of
right.
course, it's just like very contradicting to the society that we live in.
Well, not even queer history, it's like people didn't disclose their identities,
That
right?
too.
People stayed hidden. I can't even like, I know for a fact there were women who signed up for male only services, such as, like, the military and stuff like that, who may have found it more fitting to identify as male, didn't necessarily come out as transgender,
Right.
but may found it more fitting to identify as male and signed up for services, and they
Right.
have been lost to history because obviously why they're not going to tell their story.
Right.
They're not going to say anything. They're hiding. That's like kind of the whole point.
Or even throughout
Um
history, like people who, when like there is more acceptance of like queer, I guess you say like gay and like lesbian identities, like there is definitely a possibility that there was people identified as gay were just very feminine, but were actually trans, but had no other way to express it, or vice versa.
right. And there's also people around the globe who don't identify as transgender but are sort of a part of that community or just identify as part of like an alternative lifestyle type of community.
Right.
In college, I read this book and it's called Allah Made Us. I'm pretty sure that was, yeah, it's called Allah Made Us, and it's about the Yandadu community in Nigeria. And this is a very, very fascinating read because it really opened my eyes to all different types of people and how things aren't what we perceive them to be in the Western world. Like, I think we identify as everything like comes from our lens and our language, and that's
Yeah.
just not true. So, if you don't know anything about the Yandadu are a group of people in Nigeria who live as women, but were born men. They don't identify as transgender, and they are basically within communities, and they don't identify as queer. They identify as straight women for a period of time. And so basically, they have like communities within Nigeria that are quite small, but everything is run and operated by Yandadu people. There are like brothels, and there are restaurants, and there are like just housing and stuff like that. It's all operated by either women or Yandadu. And basically, it's these women who identify as women for a period of time, and then at some point go back to identifying as men and get married and have a family and kind of like live their lives after that. Not everyone does, but a lot of them do. And that's just kind of like part of the culture, part of their community. They have like a very specific way of acting, a very even like a very specific way of laughing. Like there's like a very specific thing that goes into being a part of this community. And what had happened was I don't remember the year. I'd have to look it up, or you could just look it up in the book yourself. But basically, LGBT groups in the West tried to quote unquote save the fucking Yandadu, even though they were living perfectly fine and did not want to be saved or even like donate to or anything. Like they didn't want
Right.
anything to do with LGBT communities at all from any other part of the world. And so LGBT groups from the West came in and were trying to like identify and help these groups of people. And they were all saying, like, no, please go away. And because these groups from the West identified them as like transgender and gay and all this other stuff, the Nigerian government went into these communities, raided these communities, and destroyed them and arrested or killed people who were within the communities. And they were like, bro, we weren't even like, we aren't gay and we aren't transgender. We're Yandadu. Like, that's who we are.
Yeah.
And the reason I got onto this subject is because I think people don't understand that, like, there are communities out there. There are tons of communities. There's the Ladyboys in Thailand and all different types of communities across the globe that aren't identifying as transgender but are living alternative lifestyles. And so it isn't just this new wave, new thing that has,
Radical left.
yeah, radical left that has like invaded your children. It's been a thing for a very long time, and it may not be called quote unquote transgender or whatever. People may not be like very vocal about it, but it's been happening for hundreds of thousands of years since the beginning of time and humanity, right? Like we've gone into, native communities and have seen that like in native Hawaii, in Native American, and native Aboriginal people in their history and in their writing, they have had two-spirited people. They have had people who don't identify as male or female, and they have their place in the community and identify as something completely different. And this is something that has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
In Greece, there have been people who are gay, lesbian. So this isn't
Plenty
something that's,
documented.
yeah, incredibly documented.
Overly documented, you may
Yeah,
say.
right. I mean, this is something that was happening obviously within the time of the Bible being written because
Mhm.
people talk about it in the Bible. And
Yeah, how can
so,
it be a sin if it didn't exist?
right, to think that like this is like a new trend that's
Right.
going around is like it's just ignorant and like if you I just don't get it. Like I just feel like if you have no information on a topic, like then just keep your head in your ass and don't have an opinion about it. Like obviously
Right.
like listen, like we're obviously giving you our opinions that are unsolicited, but we do also have information to back up the things that we do believe in and have knowledge
Exactly.
about the topics that we talk about. And if we don't have knowledge around it, then why would the fuck would we even think or talk about it? I don't really like I do think, for example, that not every American should have access to assault rifles, but I also don't necessarily go out and talk about the gun issue because I don't have enough knowledge around it. I just don't really care that much about it.
Right.
Of course, I have sympathy for people who have been affected by gun violence, but it's not something that I do research on.
Right.
I was a women's history and LGBTQ history minor in
Right.
college. And I was a sociology major. Like, this is something that I really understand and know and I'm passionate about. I've done a lot of reading and a lot of fucking essays about. So, like, it's just absolutely asinine that people don't get this how nuanced this topic is and don't have any idea of what they're talking about and then continue to have these stupid fucking opinions that are just barfed into their fucking little teeny tiny brains by fucking idiots who have controlled the media for far too long
Yeah.
and are giving them this fucking information that is absolutely ridiculous and has no basis. Like shit about people being groomed, blah blah blah. Your fucking groomers are in the goddamn fucking church. They're in your schools. They're in
In
your fucking
politics.
politics. These are the people who are fucking grooming you and your children.
And again,
So,
like, I think it's also important to note that, like, well, at least for me, I can't speak for you, obviously, but like, I very much do not identify with either Republican or Democrat.
oh
I'm
yeah.
obviously, our views tend to be liberal leaning. However,
Mhm.
I also dislike the quote liberal agenda just as
Mhm.
much as I dislike the conservative agenda.
Mhm.
Because, like, even within the community, I mean, even if you look at, I think ContraPoints actually uh,
I love
brought, I
ContraPoints.
know, shout out ContraPoints, but also kind of brought this up where even I guess you could say more like traditional transgender people who kind of stick to the binary will be hateful towards people who don't stick to the binary, where it's like,
Mhm.
again, that is still just fulfilling this whole role of the societal standard of you're either a man or you're a woman,
Mhm.
which it's like you don't have to be fucking any of it.
Mhm.
And it's like just because someone chooses to be fully passable as a woman does
Mhm.
not mean that every single transgender person has to be. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be either this or that. It doesn't mean everyone has to get surgery in the same way,
Mhm.
like even when it comes just within the community, it's so toxic and like
Yeah.
so ignorant.
Mhm.
Like, I even remember when it comes to pronouns, I saw this fucking tweet. Here, let me pull it up and just read it. So, the original tweet was, "You say you go by any pronouns, and people stick with one set." And then, someone responded of like, "I don't think it's other people's responsibility to Russian roulette any pronoun for you. If you feel like going by a different set one day, that's great, but make that known. If you tell others they can use any, then that's what that means."
Mhm.
And then someone else had responded, "I'm so tired of y'all being lazy if someone says they go by any pronouns. It obviously means not just one, and you're not slick by calling people you perceive as feminine she." And it's
Right.
like, oh my god. This is another example of touch fucking grass.
Yeah.
Touch fucking grass, bitch.
No, I absolutely agree that like people on both sides are fucking idiots
Oh my
and have
god,
never
it's
like
so
done any
bad.
research, have never done anything in their entire lives. Like, yes, obviously your lived experience is vital and it also does play a role in how you perceive the world, how you perceive this issue, how you perceive other issues, blah, 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 blah,
But
blah,
look
blah.
outside of yourself sometimes.
Or don't talk about it, right? Like,
Or
there are
that.
certain things that, like, if you just don't get it, then, like, don't fucking talk about it. Like, we don't need to
Right.
hear every single person's opinion about every single thing.
Or at least be so loud about it. Like, obviously, like, everyone's gonna have whatever opinion they have, but, like,
Mhm.
don't think like you were the only correct stance if you don't know anything about the topic.
Right. And I also think, honestly, when it comes to issues like this, well, number one, it's not even an issue. And number two, I think that a lot of people tend to just listen to whatever the people they choose to like have to say.
Right.
And this is like where the issue of having Republicans versus Democrats is so fucking stupid
Yeah.
because
And kind of scary.
it's terrifying and it's asinine.
Yeah.
Like, why the fuck do we have two political parties and there's only one way of thinking on each side? And if you step out of line either way, you're gonna be fucking like ejected from the party and you're told you're
Yeah.
not a good enough Republican or a good enough Democrat. When most people, in general, most people are in between and have much more nuanced and complicated views on any of these topics, right? Like,
And not to mention the people who are at the top having these certain viewpoints typically have no like real background or education in the topics that they're like spewing shit on.
right, or they're lying. So
Or that for
actually,
like political gain or monetary gain.
right. Have you seen God Forbid? It's on Hulu.
No.
So it's this new documentary, and I started watching it, and at first I was just kind of like, "Oh, this is dumb," and then I was like, "Oh, now I get why this is a controversy." So basically, what happened was, I'm gonna butcher all these people's names, but basically, what happened was there's this guy who runs Liberty College, and I forget his name now. It's like Jerry. I think it's Jerry or Dermy or something.
Very forgettable name.
Yeah, his last name starts with an F. But if you Google God forbid, you'll like know what I'm talking about. We'll put like the link to it in the show notes. It's on Hulu. But yeah, so basically there's this guy Jerry and then his wife Beth, and they run Liberty College, which is like this incredibly conservative, like super evangelical college. And so his father started it and then he like kind of did his own thing and then came back to it and like basically saved the school financially. And so he was like this evangelical preacher or whatever, and he was part of the reason that Trump got elected in the first place because he was like part of like the critical beginning of evangelicals like taking Trump as their candidate and
Mhm.
basically listening to only him and no one else, which even a lot of Trump's political party have turned against him and his fan base hasn't, and it's because of this guy specifically starting kind of like this movement behind him. This is going to be a little bit of a spoiler if, well, not really, they talk about it from the very beginning, but it's a little bit of a spoiler if you actually want to go watch the documentary. So you can pause here, watch the documentary, and come back. But basically, what happened was his wife was fucking around on him, and he was watching. So his fetish is like to be a cuck. And basically, what happened was the guy who she was fucking was this 21-year-old pool boy from Miami. And he was like a Republican Christian guy or whatever, but he was 21 and I guess she approached him and like had money and stuff like that and was like, "Hey, do you want to like come fuck me?" And then he was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And then
I was like, well, if you got the money for it, sure.
yeah, and so then like, well, I don't know if she actually paid him or whatever, or like she just kind of like gave him like, I don't know, like, I don't really remember, like, the whole beginnings of it, but basically, like, I don't know if she even told him, like, necessarily what was going on,
Mm.
essentially. She just basically was like, "Hey, do you wanna, like, come fuck me?" And then he got to the hotel room, and the husband was there, and he was, like, watching, and he was like, "Okay,
What the
guess."
fuck?
Yeah, and so,
Well, that's an important piece of the fucking.
yeah, for real. And so on top of all that, they were also giving him like property and like putting it in his name. And this was like a $4 million transaction of like,
The
yeah, like they gave him like a $4 million property. It was like a hostel, I think, in Miami. They put it in his name, they put it in her name, and so they owned it together, this like 21-year-old and his wife. own this hostel together, and he's making all this money off of it. And then there was like some lawsuit that happened with the people who like sold them the hospital because it was like this father and son who were like grifters or something like that. And it was like this whole thing, right? So there's like this lawsuit, and that's how it came out about this affair that was happening. And it also came out that she was doing this to other young boys, and he was doing this to other young girls. And at the college, like students, like they were like fucking around with students and shit
Oh
like
my
that, and like
god.
filming it and like all this crazy shit. And like not just them, but other people within their party, like within the Republican Party, people who are evangelicals were like all these like super freaky deaky type of people who were like flirting with everyone and like
So holy.
yeah, like John Carlo, who was like the pool boy or whatever, he like went to a bunch of these events and like met all these people, like these people who were like high profile, like preachers and stuff like that, and they were all just kind of like fucking each other. And even like his mom was like, I like didn't realize how much of an act all of this was and how weird all these people are, and like we need to leave and I don't want to ever see any of these people again, and
No
like
shit.
all this crazy shit. And so I say all this because it's a really interesting documentary and I highly recommend everyone watching it because it's fascinating. But also, a lot of people in politics are lying to you. So, like,
Oh
make your
yeah.
own fucking informed decisions and opinions before, like, casting out entire groups of people just because you do not understand them.
Don't think this is just obviously the Republican Party. Like obviously the
No,
Democrats do the same shit. Like all of this stuff it's like proven all the time, even though they fucking pay everyone off.
right. And I mean, like, come on, like, fucking, like, Bill Clinton and, like, Oprah and, like, all these people, like, they
Mm-hmm.
were on Jeffrey Epstein's fucking fly list.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so no, it's absolutely not just Republicans. I think the difference is, though, that, like, Democrats aren't as there's not as much to lose when this
Yeah.
kind of stuff comes out, right?
Right. Because
Because
they're already like radical leftists.
right.
Wokes.
Whereas, like, Republicans really pride themselves and
That image.
overtly, like, put themselves out there as these, like, Puritans who don't allow anything to happen
Right.
and are
Even just when it
then
comes to like abortion, like all of them have fucking gotten abortions or paid off people to have abortions and all this shit. Like it's all a fucking facade.
right, and
They don't care about the right to life and all that shit.
that's, like, where all of this is, like, so fucking stupid because,
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's just fucking stupid. They say they don't believe in any of this stuff and then go and turn around and fuck, like, young transgender, like, girls,
Yeah.
and then, like, the next day, like, are, like, cucking their wives, like, it's just so fucking stupid, and that's where,
Yep.
like, all this is, like, so fucking dumb. I don't even know how we got into this rant about all this stuff.
It doesn't matter.
Right,
But
but
even
it's
if
like
like obviously whatever you can ask your local transgender person, but like there's a lot of especially like well, I guess you can say quote unquote straight men who specifically look for trans women because it's a fucking fetish.
mhm,
And like
mhm,
and then go out in public and like vote down their right to exist or right
uh-huh.
to healthcare. And it's like everything is a fucking facade, and it's just like so ridiculous that people still um like hide behind these curtains.
I know, it's, like, literally 2022, like, we're all fucking freaks, like, just
Yeah. Just be like open to it.
yeah. And, like, I also think that the more open to some of this stuff you are, like, the more pure, I guess, you are?
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain that, like,
Well,
you're
you're not
not
lying?
right, but there's not as much repression, and so
Yeah.
you're not into as, like, much, like, dirty, dirty shit.
Right.
Obviously, there are gonna be people who are still into, like, really disgusting, horrible things
Right.
that are just, like, morally gross, but it's really, like, this repression and this inability to talk about, like, what you're actually into and, like, what you actually want out of life and, like, be able to just be your fucking self that causes so much strife and anger and
Right.
confusion and sadness and depression, and then you are led down this path of secrecy and hiding and
Yeah. Because it builds up inside of you.
mhm.
That's why everyone fucking needs therapy.
Yeah, and that's not every single person, right? Like, we're not saying
For
that every
sure.
single fucking Republican is a secret gay or something like that, right? Because that's not fair either.
Although I'm sure it's quite the population.
Maybe, but I also don't think it's necessarily fair to say that, like, every single gay hating person is gay.
No, for sure. Some just
But
genuinely hate us.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's just like a stance that people take to like gain support when I do think there are some people who really genuinely dislike this lifestyle or like being, I guess, like queer because they genuinely do believe that it's a choice and that you're turning against God and blah 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 blah.
Right. When it comes to religion, or, like if you're really just stuck in the mindset of like, there is man and there is woman.
Right. And also, but I do know, like, okay, so here's the thing, like, I know people specifically who are just like really sad and disgusting and depressed, and that's why they have so many judgments about other people.
Yeah.
Because their life is so pathetic and sad.
Yeah. They just have nowhere to place it.
Yeah. And like they have no ability to be aware of how pathetic their life is.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that they don't know that their life is pathetic, they do know.
Yeah.
But they aren't like aware of it, and that's why they then turn to judgment of other people because like you said there's nowhere for them to place how stupid and dumb their life is.
And I think like in some ways, like you can just be like, okay, well, you're just fucking stupid and hateful and it's whatever. It just
Mhm.
becomes very difficult when these are the same people who are like voting
Mhm, yeah.
and or who are abiding by the same mindsets, I guess, and like validating the opinions of other people who act violently upon these
Mhm.
groups of people. Because it's like if you just have your harmless fucking shitty opinion, then go on and have your harmless fucking shitty opinion.
Yeah.
But when your opinion turns to violence,
Mhm.
then that's a problem.
Right. And it also turns to like suppression of any other type of idea out
Right.
there. Cause like for example, I know this past election a lot of people who were like between the ages of like 18 and like 30 or whatever, like have gone out in droves to actually vote this time, which is unprecedented. There's a lot of like looking to suppress that younger vote. And that's like been a huge problem with that too. So, and also I wanted to point out that when I say like stupid and pathetic lives, I mean that like they're genuinely unhappy.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Um
Not just like what I perceive as stupid and pathetic.
yeah, I mean like whatever, if you want to do whatever you want to do with your life, that's fine. If that's what makes you feel fulfilled and feel
Right.
happy and successful. But if you hate your life and then continue to hate your life and make choices that make your life even more hated by you,
Right.
then like that's pathetic and
Right.
it's um honestly it's a cop out.
Right. Exactly.
But all that being said, that's our show.
Hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, that's thoughts and opinions.
Obviously, like neither of us are trans, so there's only so many viewpoints that we can have. And like obviously it's important to recognize that. However, I
Yeah.
think we can also like further discussion because there are trans people in our lives. Why don't we
Mhm.
have them on the pod and like discuss like their experience, Like that's
Yeah.
always something that we can do as well. So if
Right.
this is stuff that interests you, then email us,
Yeah.
tweet us,
Email us,
DM
right?
us.
Because it's fucking 2001. I mean, for me personally, I do know as someone who doesn't necessarily conform to the idea of woman,
Mhm.
I do obviously I don't necessarily get as much like issue outside in the world because people just perceive me as woman no matter what I say or do. But it
Right.
is quite frustrating as someone who doesn't necessarily identify as woman to then have these transgressions happen within people that I absolutely love and trust. People who I've asked very specifically to identify me in a very specific way and then they like don't. And it's one thing to make a mistake, but it's another thing to like actively not listen to me.
Right.
And so I do understand it from that perspective, but
Especially if like you've known them your whole life, like it kind of is
yeah.
what it is as long as like you're trying, and over time it just becomes easier.
Yeah.
But it's
And
especially people that like
just don't fucking care.
right, there's a big difference.
And so I just wanted to put that out there because like I do have some like I guess very very limited perspective on this issue just from my own personally experienced, but
For sure.
obviously, like Casey said, we would love to talk to anyone who has anything to say about this topic, even people who
Yeah.
disagree with us, because I think that is what we're moving towards with the point of this podcast, is talking to people who don't necessarily agree to all of our thoughts and opinions.
Ben Shapiro, we're waiting on you.
Day one of asking Ben Shapiro to be on the pod. This is how we end every episode.
Yeah, until he's on the pod. We're waiting on you, Ben. Ball is in your court.
All right. Well, I guess there's nothing left to say, but
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Bell on Earth, the podcast. We hope that your minds have been expanded and your pussies have been opened.
Be sure to rate and follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music.
This podcast is brought to you by Free Studio Productions. It's hosted and produced by Cassidy and Casey Bell. Big thanks to our executive producer, Dark Benton.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for all of your content needs. See you later, haters.